What's up, Hoof listeners? Welcome into Thursday as we break down the Bills' crazy moves, right? Crazy week, lots of cuts, lots of movement. Um, Pretty wild time, right?
Yeah, wild day in being a Bills fan, especially for the quote unquote off season. But obviously, Brandon Beane does not have an off season, and with the true new season or new year, new league year starting next week, Beane was like, "Well, I got weekend plans, so I'm not working." And yeah, let's get this done now because it all came. And kudos to him. I have to say, the one thing I was surprised by, kudos to him for keeping a lock on everything, because he's been working this for a long time and nothing came out. None of these rumors, nothing until Wednesday when it all happened and went down, right? Like, I was impressed by that too, but man, what a day. It was just blow after blow. It for all of Bill's Mafia, I feel like we had to take a breath and be like, wait a minute, what just happened? Like,
Yeah.
how is this
Yes.
gonna, it takes you a second to process it all. But man, I've definitely got
Right. Well, you're
reactions
you're
for
you're
all.
processing one big move, right? Okay, Jordan Poyer's cut. Okay, yeah, okay. Had a great run with the Bills, man. We're gonna
Right.
miss him.
Had
Then
a
all of a
feeling,
sudden,
yeah.
boom, Trey White's cut. And you're like, oh, it kind of doubles as you go throughout the day. It was kind of all at once there. So Um, I think it's a time of excitement, right? There's a little bit of excitement because the Bills, look, they're getting younger, right? We don't know what that story is going to be yet. They have 10 draft picks, right? Now they have some cap room. It's looking like they're going to have a little more cap room than we initially thought, right? The bargain bin in free agency got a little bigger, but it's also kind of really a sad time, right? Because it's like we kind of
Yeah.
watched this Bills team coming out of the drought years mature into a continual competitor. And I think these three guys in particular, Trey White, Jordan Poyer, and Mitch Morse, were a huge part of that. And that story is now written, and you're looking back on it, and they're kind of known as the group that was super close to winning it
Yeah.
all, but couldn't finish it, right? But
Yeah.
I think they deserve all the credit in the world for getting this team to maturity. You know what I mean? So we can be in this position of playoffs every year, and the expectations are super high. Uh, so yeah, it's a little bit of a sad story when you start thinking about it in those terms.
Yeah, but in my mind, I look forward to the day that these guys end up on the Wall of Fame, because Poyer and Hyde certainly belong there as one of the greatest safety tandems in all of football, in my mind. They were, definitely eligible and definitely able to be Wall of Fame guys in my mind. Trey White, with the impact he had, they're part of that culture shift for Buffalo, right? All of us will forever remember this team and the drought team and how we came out of that. And these players all played a huge part of that. And they can't ever take that away from us, right? Even though it is going to be, we never won a championship with them. And when we eventually do, it's guys like this that I'm going to be thinking about, right? We are here because of what Hyde and Poyer and Tre'Davious White did, right? Once we get to there, and I know that we will, it's going to be bittersweet in that moment thinking about the guys who also deserve a part in giving us that championship who aren't on the team any longer. And this was really the first time we've seen a big impact of that. Guys who were part of the change that are no longer going to be part of the biggest end result.
Yeah, well said. And like who's the biggest surprise for you? I know, I don't think I was really that surprised when I saw Trey White. Back to back
Sure.
injuries. 29-year-old cornerback. Got a lot of later round guys and Christian Benford. Rasul Douglas coming over. So there seems like there's good depth there, right? So when he got cut, I was kind of expecting that. We've played with the numbers and you go through the scenarios, and it just feels like that one was always sticking out for us. But really, Jordan Poyer was a little surprising to me just because he did sign the 2-year deal not too long ago. I
Mhm.
thought he would play that out.
Yeah.
And then the real big surprise for me was Mitch Morse. Just didn't see that coming at all, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was the one I've been saying all along. I thought he was going to get an extension, especially after the Bates trade. You're like, okay, they're trading him away. They're saying we're confident in who we got. It made sense. It's Morse last year. You could, give him an extension and save the cap, which they did with McGovern in a way. They put dead years, but you know, they changed his. So I'm like, oh, Morse is going to be the next part to do that. And I know that he's had concussion issues in the past, but that really hasn't reared up recently with him, and we just came off the best offensive line in Josh Allen's history. So I assumed that they were going to try and keep that continuity as best they could while maintaining, some of that backups just in case, right? And instead, we got the cut of Mitch Morse, which was one that I was kind of, I think that was the one that I was more surprised. Trey
Right.
White hurt the most. Poyer I was expecting. So Trey White hurt the most, but Morse was like, oh, okay, what really are they doing on the offensive end? So yeah, I mean, emotions after emotions with every single one. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think if you look around the team, right, and you ask yourself, what's the strength of the Bills, right? Especially the offense. Like, what's the strength outside of quarterback? Obviously, it's the offensive line, right? The
Hmm.
continuity. They played every single snap together this year. I
Yep.
think that I can't remember that happening in the past.
The
And Deion
flourishing of
Dawkins,
James Cook in the
right?
run
Cook,
game, right? That was that good
right.
offensive line, right?
But Deion
Yeah.
Dawkins having a good season, and then his comments about it in the postseason and how special it was for him. I thought for sure the offensive line was safe, right?
Yeah.
This is the
Yes.
strength of the offense right now. So,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
but instead they kind of cut the head off it with cutting Mitch
Right.
Morris. So it's like now
Right.
we got to kind of deal with will it be the same? Will they be as good? Um,
Yeah. And
kind
we
of readjusting the expectations a little bit.
And you have to talk, about the big picture overall. Why did Mitch Morse get cut? It's not because they don't see him as the guy anymore. It's because he was due $8.5 million that they could clear completely off the books by cutting him. So he became a cap casualty in that sense, right? Look, we're 50 million over, 40 million, whatever it was, coming in with all these moves, that Brandon Beane did. It's pretty much there now. But I think that is truly what it came down to. If he was, not such a big salary, I think they would have kept him around. But it's unfortunate because again, he's a guy who brought consistency to Josh Allen, right? When he came in, Josh Allen took that next step, and now him leaving is we know Josh Allen is capable of doing it now with whoever's under center, but it's interesting that they
Yeah.
did choose to move on from him.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, Josh Allen's been touching his butt on the field for 5 seasons. I mean, it's they have that
Yeah, they're
special
intimate.
bond, you know what I
They're
mean?
intimate. Yeah.
So now you're gonna have a different guy there. Look, sounds like it's Connor McGovern. We'll see. I mean, I feel like if the Bills have an opportunity, maybe a center falls in round 3 or 4, they'll take a look. But it's more than likely going to be Connor McGovern, who I don't think's played center. Right? There's 2 Connor McGoverns in the NFL as well. Right? There's one for the Jets, and there's also
Yes.
the Connor McGovern on the Bills, previously with Dallas. But he's been a left guard his whole career, to my
Yeah, I
knowledge.
think I think Joe Marino on his podcast said that McGovern did get snaps at center in the NFL, and he was a center in college, I guess. So
Okay,
he for a
that would
year
make
at
sense.
least. So he has snaps at center. He's capable of playing center. But the fact that we've never seen him play center is, like, oh, now he's
Right.
going to be the guy suddenly. I think that was more surprising than the actual cut was like, oh, now we're going to move Connor McGovern over. We'll see if that happens or not. That was one report during all of this. And maybe that is the case. But just like you were saying, and we were talking a little bit before we went live, the biggest shock to me is that they chose to shake up this offensive line that was the best offensive line under Josh Allen. Like you said, Deion Dawkins praised the fact that he had a consistent left guard for the first time, and this was the best pair he had. And now we're not only cutting the center and moving that position, but we're taking the left guard who was successful on that line and moving him to center. So in a sense, you're creating 2 new holes. Now, maybe they think that's the best way to upgrade and they have a plan for left guard, whether that's, Edwards, who was re-signed, as we're going to talk about. But again, we've never seen Edwards play left guard for this team. He was the 6th offensive lineman, did a great job in that role. I'm super glad to have him back. But you're just going to insert him into the starting lineup without seeing it, play out at all? So, I mean, that was the more shocking and the most questions I have left, I would say, after this move, because it seems that you're moving a lot of dominoes in a place where it really matters for the success of this offense.
Yeah, and I think you heard a lot of good things from coaches, offensive line coach about David Edwards, right? And his name popped up throughout the season. But you got to think the way they paid him and extended him, he's competing for that role, right? I feel
Mhm.
like they're going to bring somebody in to compete there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a slam dunk he's the starting
Always.
left guard next year. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation because they've had such good continuity. They're getting results through the run game, and giving Josh time to pass the ball. Hopefully that doesn't get disrupted. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know.
I
All right.
mean, obviously, you got to trust that Bean and McDermott have a plan for this,
Yeah.
and Aaron Cromer, the offensive line coach. So they know something.
What's your favorite Mitch Morse moment?
Oh man,
Putting you on the spot here.
You know what? He is truly a leader of men, right? That's what when we went through the hardest games, the hardest times. Who was it that they put on the mic? And I'm not talking about when we win games. This is when you lose and you have to face the music. When we were 6-6 this season, who stood up there? Mitch Morse. That's who they had at the mic. And the guy took every bullet and said everything correctly. And that to me was like when I was most excited that Mitch Morse was on my team. You
Right.
know what? Like, man, I'm proud to have this guy on my team because he sticks up there and he knows what to say. He has his guys back, but he's not afraid to face the media and say what needs to be said. And, he was a captain and a true leader. And that was something that stood out for me. And he's done that over the years with this team, right? He's not afraid to face the music and go out there where some guys, their instinct is, I'm so angry, I have to walk away. He was the one to step up and say, that's okay. I will do it. I'm the one. I want to be in front of the mic and talk about, what happened and what went wrong and all of that. And, I'll always appreciate him for that. But his consistency can't go unsaid, right? Like we talked about, when he came in, Josh Allen was able to take that next step. So, not that he was missing a good center. It's that an experienced center came in and built that chemistry with Josh Allen and allowed him to grow with him.
Yeah, and anytime you cut a veteran player, there's a leadership void, right? That somebody's going to have to step into. I think Mitch Morse leaves a large void there, and likely Josh is so much more mature now than he was when Mitch Morse was signed in, was it 2018 or 2019?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think there's a void there, especially in the offensive line room. I mean, who's going to step up and be the leader the way Mitch Morse was, right? It will never be the same. But yeah, he's 4 seasons in Kansas City for him, 5 seasons in Buffalo, 32 years old next month. Do you think he gets signed elsewhere?
Yes. I mean, it's offensive line is too premium to not, right? I mean, this guy just had an excellent season by every measure, and he was an all-pro not too long ago as well. So I think somebody is going to pay him. Is he going to get 8.5? Probably not. Will he get 5-6? Sure. In his sleep, I think somebody will give him that, right? Like,
got to be a 1 or 2 year deal, right? I wouldn't expect to see a 3 or 4 year deal.
Yeah, it's going to be a team-friendly deal, something that's cuttable just in case. What if he gets injured in the preseason? Okay, we cut him. We don't lose anything. Teams are going to do their due diligence there. But he certainly belongs on an NFL roster, if not definitely starting for a team. So somebody's going to pay him to do exactly that. Yeah.
And you just reminded me of another Mitch Morse moment. I think it was the NFL Top 100 and Josh Allen. They're talking about Josh Allen and how fast he was. And it showed Mitch Morse swinging out in the quarterback design run, right? And they're both sprinting full speed, and Josh Allen just runs right by him. So he was picking on himself, and it was hilarious. But, I mean, that's Mitch Morse, something we'll miss, right? He can do those kinds of things as a center. Swing out, right? We've seen it numerous times. I mean, he's a very fast guy for a center, right? Who can contribute to the run game when you have a running quarterback. So I'm not sure if Connor McGovern's that style of player, so maybe you missed that part of the game now, right? You have to find somebody else to fill that role. All right, moving on here. Jordan Poyer cut after 7 seasons. They saved $5.72 million in cap savings. Jordan Poyer really showed up a lot. I mean, he had a lot of injuries, things like that, but I mean, he always came back. I feel like this guy was just so consistent being there for his team, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Somebody who was reliable on the field in terms of what he did. I mean, obviously, he was remarkable at safety and really transformed that position on the field. So much so that we as Bills Mafia and, the team, we didn't have to think about safety ever because we had, the tandem there and Poyer was part of that. So even though Hyde played his role, Poyer ended up stepping up when Hyde got injured, doing all sorts of things. He played through injury. He did whatever the team asked him. He, again, was one of those leaders on the defense. And I think, you know, Poyer was truly a team guy in a sense that think about the game when he had to drive because he couldn't
Oh yeah,
fly, right? And he drove
yeah. He had a
hours to
punctured lung or something like that,
yeah,
right?
and he couldn't go on the plane.
Yeah, he missed the plane, a collapsed lung. It was a collapsed lung.
Yeah,
Missed the plane, so he drove a van,
yeah.
to the Bills game against Kansas City. So from Buffalo to Kansas
Unbelievable,
City.
right? Like, that
Yeah,
is true dedication to the team, and his interactions with Bill's Mafia, right, are one of the best, right? This is a guy who truly embraced Bill's Mafia and became one of us, right? And he always will be, and that's why I said I truly believe he is a guy who will be on the Wall of Fame someday because he's earned that both in his play on the field, what he's meant to the community, what he's put out for this team. There aren't a lot of guys who go above and beyond like that. That is not the expectation. You're hurt, you have a punctured leg, you can't go on the play. Okay, you're gonna miss a game. That's okay. No, he wouldn't let that happen. And he knew the team needed him, right? That's the biggest thing. It wasn't like okay, you can hang back, this isn't that big of a game or whatever, and we got somebody in your place. No, we were dealing with other injuries and other issues and needed him to be on the field. And even this season, when we needed him to be our pseudo linebacker, right? He pulled up, that's not his role. It's not his body type, but he was able to do that for this team. And talk about somebody who was a true system guy. I mean, I feel like he could run the defense out there. Maybe he'll be a coach someday, but yeah, I mean, Poyer is going to be missed, but this move I was not
yeah,
surprised at just because the number and also he was aging. You could see it this year, I thought, for the first time. His aging, his kind of, missing a little half step. He was still vital, but yeah, I just thought with that, you couldn't justify paying him that
mm.
big of a salary.
Right. In the situation they were in with the cap, you just have to find that money. And Jordan Poyer, I think it was just right there for him. He's 32 years old, right? And I don't think there was any dead cap on this one. It was a straight cut, right? So they get the full 5.72 million on the towards the cap. But yeah, I think Jordan Poyer, that this to me, strong safety now becomes a huge need, right? With free safety, we talked about it. Okay, they'll be able to fill that. We'll draft a guy. We'll sign a guy, the bargain bin in free agency. Corner, we have depth, right? But I feel like strong safety, there's no plan right now. And it's one of the most important positions on the defense. Am I wrong?
Yes and no. So I think there are free agents out there that you can sign at this point. Lots of guys have been cut. Lots of guys are changing places. And I do think I would not consider, and just like I've said before on this show, safety is not a position of concern for me. My expectation was that Hyde would be retiring or be gone and Poyer would be cut. So I've never been concerned about safety because I trust Sean McDermott and know what his defense can do. I don't care if they take two undrafted guys and make
Blind
them our
faith.
starting safeties, right?
Good old
Like,
blind faith.
yeah, I mean, it's not a position where I feel like it needs premium,
Yeah.
investment, right?
Well,
There's
I think
going to
there's
be
a
a lot of
difference,
safeties out there. There's going
right?
to be somebody who can take on that role.
And there's a difference between free safety and strong safety. What strong safeties are asked to do now, whether playing big nickel, right, covering, stopping the run, coming down and playing linebacker, it's a lot more technical to me than it used to be. So I think that position is really important. But you look at free safety, yeah, I think you can find a lot of guys that fill that sort of role, right? It's just don't allow a big play, basically. But again, I think they have to be kind of versatile too, right? The strong safety also has to do those things on the other side of the field. So I mean, it's I don't think this is quite an easy role to fill. You know what I mean?
Well,
I mean,
I mean, you're not going to fill the shoes of Jordan Poyer.
right,
Like I said, he was an elite
right.
level player
But if you
and like
draft a guy,
system
it's
guy.
like you kind of want an athletic guy, so you have to kind of draft
I
early. If you sign a guy in the bargain bin, it's like you just somebody to fill even 3/4 of what Jordan Poyer is going to be a challenge. Is my only
Correct.
point.
You do exactly what you did when you got those two to begin with, Hyde and Poyer. You find the guy. They know they're evaluators, right? McDermott's the one who handpicked these guys, I'm sure. So he's doing the same thing right now. He has two guys in mind who he's like, these are my top targets. I want them on my team next year. And Bean is the one who has to get it done or not, right? Like Bean will know, can we make the numbers work? But it's not like we originally signed them for huge deals at all. They came in as bargain guys who ended up getting paid because they were phenomenal in this system. And I think that's exactly the route they're going to go again here. They're going to sign multiple safeties. I don't think it's just going to be two. It's going to be a number of guys to compete, veteran guys, and then say, okay,
Mhm.
and we play enough of three safeties, at times. So you got to, they're all going to get play, I'm sure, even
Right.
if we do keep all three. But at least even in terms of depth and starters, I think you rely on the free agents, and maybe you draft a safety late. But I am not for drafting a safety early. We talked about this in our last show. Would I be happy if we got? Sure, we can get one of those top talents. Great, but it's not going to move the needle for me. I'm not going to get excited about it. I'm not going to be like, oh, this is the greatest player since sliced bread. No, I want it to be the veterans who come in and get the job done.
Is there anybody on the roster that's going to compete for the strong safety role? Like with free safety, we have Taylor Rapp.
There's nobody.
There's a lot of conversation about like,
Yeah.
okay, he could start, but it's definitely not Micah Hyde. But okay, we'll take him as a starter, right? He kind of got was it 3 years, 14 million? That to me is like borderline starter money versus competition. You might be the backup, right? I don't think we have that for strong safety. There's no one on the roster that I think is competing for the starting role.
Right. I mean, there's only Hamlin and now Rapp, right? So I mean, you get
Cam Lewis. You want to go that route? Sean McDermott's mentioned one other time that Christian Benford could potentially move to safety. That's interesting to me.
Stop it. Now that's out of the
question.
question.
That's when Jordan Poyer wasn't. We weren't sure if he was going to re-sign or not. He kind of mulled the idea. I don't think there's anything serious to it, but I mean, is that an option?
Not going to happen. No. Christian Benford is way too good of a cornerback. You're not moving him to safety at all for any reason on any team. No, he's a cornerback. That is a way more premium position, and he deserves to be there. He's played his ass off at that position. He's earned it, right? You're not going to say, oh, by the way, can you, go to this position now? It's like going from CEO to like, oh, will you take the garbage out over there and, be that guy now? No, he's earned that position. So not that safety is that devalued on this team, but to go from being the guy who became a premium cornerback in the NFL to trying to move to safety, that would be stupid. So I don't think there's zero chance of that happening with McDermott and B.
And the Trey White cut definitely contributes to that as
exactly.
Well, it's fun to mold the idea. Anyway, let's move on. Trey White cut after 7 seasons. 10.2 million in savings. That's post June 1st, so that'll show up after June 1st. Don't get that benefit now, but Trey White. So the first thing that comes to mind is Trey White was, the Bills and Chiefs traded the draft picks in 2017, ended up being Trey White and Pat Mahomes, right? So that story is now complete.
Mm-hmm.
Like Trey White, great draft pick, got a lot out of him, but man, you could have had Pat Mahomes there. And that story will go on forever, but luckily for the Bills, that worked out. But that story is now complete. Trey White coming off 2 injuries, right? Played 11 games in the 21-22 season before tearing his ACL. It was the Thanksgiving game versus Saints. And then last year, torn Achilles tendon in game 4 versus Miami last year. And that was just brutal to watch, right? Because you can see how emotional he was. He worked so hard to come back from the ACL, and just after 4 games to tear his Achilles was just brutal to watch. So it's kind of the last images we're going to have of Trey White as he, leaves the team and goes to play somewhere else, but didn't end well. But what are your thoughts? I mean, I think we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
We're kind of wondering, would Trey White come back healthy? A, B, would he compete to be the starter, or are we looking at Trey White as a backup, right? That was kind of the conversations we were having.
Yeah, and it was tough to say, you're not going to put Rasul Douglas and who I just praised, Christian Benford, out there as 1 and 2. So where is Trey White's position on this team? And if you're paying him big money, he's not going to be your backup cornerback, right?
Right,
And
that's what we're thinking, right?
That was the hard conversation to have. Now, I'm sure they did all they could to try and say, well, can we rework this? Can we keep you around at 5 million, whatever? But in the end, it just doesn't make sense roster wise. And that's ultimately why I think he had to get cut. And this is the one that hurts the most because he mattered so much to this team. He was the guy who brought some respect to this team, right? He's single-handedly before we had respect, even when you got Josh Allen, Nobody gave a crap about Josh Allen. They thought he was a joke. Remember? For years, it was Trey White who was in the Rookie of the Year conversation, who was an All-Pro before Josh Allen was. It was Trey White who was the guy who really brought national respectability to this team. And I think Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, well, Sean McDermott knew that, right? When they drafted him. So they relied on that, and this team changed because of him. And the fact that he was a lockdown corner for those number of years, made it easier to build the team around him, right? It was, you could copy and paste CB2 because you had Trey White, right? I mean, think of it, Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson, all these guys that were playing next to Trey White were able to play more free and loose because they knew, it's going to be, shut down over there. And so you can't understate, and not to mention his impact on the community, the Trey White Goalie Academy, his personality.
Oh yeah, so fun.
Just him as a human being, that's what Bills Mafia is going to miss more than even his play on the field, is just his personality and who he was to, Bills Mafia and, Trey White Goalie Academy and, always joking, always smiling. And unfortunately his last moment as a Buffalo Bill was, him stomping the ground and crying and, all of us getting emotional because we knew he had just worked his butt off to come back and for 2 years in a row, we were going to be without him. And the team was able to survive and move on and do what they had to do. And that also led to what this ultimate result was in him getting cut because, we were able to see what life is like without Trey White for 2 years, and it's unfortunate, but, we survived and we thrived in some ways. So he's going to, I'm sure somebody will give him a chance. It's going to depend on his health, obviously. So maybe he's not ready to go at the beginning of the season. But I do think because of his history alone and the fact that he is that dang good, and even when he came back from the last injury, he was playing so well. It's going to depend on medical evaluations, but he deserves to be a starter in the NFL.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he's kind of the first piece of the Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott era, right? Their first draft pick in 2017, kind of the first piece of the whole thing, right? Going back to that draft class, Trey White, Zay Jones, Deion Dawkins, Matt Milano, Nate Peterman, Tanner Vallejo. I mean, I think he's definitely a stud pick in the first round, right?
Absolutely.
Definitely got some really good productive years out of him and wish him the best of luck in the future. I mean, I'd love to see him on another team. Unfortunately, this is more about the cap issue and the salary. I mean, if he didn't get paid what he got paid, it maybe be a different story. But the fact that he's doing injuries and there's some large amount of cap savings there comes down to business, right?
Yeah. And this was important to note that this is a post June 1st designation, which saves you more in the cap from this year, but you have to wait for it, right? So it's not relief of that $50 million that we were over or whatever. So it does free up money down the line, but it's delayed. So again, tough pill to swallow, but business move that made sense probably for both sides, really.
Yeah. All right, what's a busy week, right? We're still going through them, right? A couple more cuts here. Nyheim Hines and Hardy cut for $8.9 million combined cap savings. Nyheim Hines, just the unfortunate events with the jet ski injury. I think they had big plans for him coming into the season. If that didn't happen, I think it's a different story, right? Good receiving running back, and then Hardy just didn't really pan out in that role. I mean, the punt return I thought was great, held that down, but just didn't see much in the passing game, right? And I think that's where the Bills were looking for an upgrade or looking for some increased production. I think Khalil Shakir actually kind of took Hardy's role there early on. So, and this makes it easy. Now I think Khalil Shakir has that locked down. This is an easy cut. You're not really going to lose much, right? Maybe you have to go find a returner, something like that. But as far as production in the offense, I don't think it's a huge problem. Your thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, Hardy, I had already written off the day the season ended. I'm like, look, there's no way he's on this team next year. He's getting cut because, it was just you saw it in action and he just wasn't it, right? We brought him in for a very specific role. It wasn't to be punt returner, even though you said like he didn't mess that role up, which is always good. He had that big touchdown for us, but it just wasn't enough. Like, I mean, you knew during the season, this guy isn't it. And we missed on this guy, and cutting him to save 4 million or whatever it was an easy decision to make in my mind. Hines, on the other hand, we didn't know where he stood after this injury, but there was always the looming, even when we traded for him, this looming, okay, by this year, you're going to have to rework his deal because he's too much against the cap. And it's very obvious that this is a rework situation. But unfortunately, because he's coming off the injury, you had to cut him and move on. And, like you said, it never came to fruition. He had that most, memorable touchdown, running back the opening kick after the Damar Hamlin incident, which will forever be remembered by the Buffalo Bills and forever be a trivia question, I'm sure, for a guy who was only on the team for, 6 games, basically. But yeah, in terms of what it just makes you think about what could have been with him, with a guy that dynamic. There's not a lot of running backs like Nyheim Hines, at least, 3 years ago, even. So, the production that could have been there would have been nice to see in this offense. But, another one where it made sense to kind of move on, let somebody else take that risk of signing somebody who's coming off of this brutal injury. And we're already moving in the next direction, right? Our running back situation, we saw James Cook get a lot of those passing attempts, even though he tended to drop a few. Maybe that's not so much where they saw the need anymore. But another guy who was a return option, that now it does seem like there is a hole in
that's
the
what I was
return
going to
game.
say. I mean, Hines didn't play last year, so they kind of figured out how to live without him, right? Kind of signing these, bargain bin running backs. For Hardy, though, there does seem to be some sort of need there, right? Okay, you have Shakir, we have Kincaid to play the slot role, but like you said, the punt returner, I think, is a huge need all of a sudden. With these two guys not coming back, got to figure out the return game.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. Free agency is out there, and you can't rule out a return of one of these guys either. I know there's some guys out there that have floated around, Devin Duvernay, right? People want to see him become a Buffalo Bill. That would be amazing. But what's he going to get in free agency? Ray McLeod, maybe he could come back, right? That would be interesting to see. No, I don't see that happening necessarily either. But could Hines come back under a cheaper deal? I think that was the idea, at least when we traded for him again. So it's not like they suddenly don't like him as long as he's healthy. That could be an option. But who knows at this point? Yeah, only Bean knows where that needle is pointing at this point.
Right. So yeah, it's time for another plan. I feel like ever since Andre Roberts left the team, they really have been shuffling returners year in and year out. Nobody's really been able to hold that position down. So, all right, let's move on here. We got Siran Neal cut after 6 seasons. I mean, held down to kind of that special teams role.
Yeah.
Saw him in some big nickel situations, right? Was good in his role, right? Team likes him. Never heard anything bad about the guy.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of excelled at his position. But again, cutting him, he's 29 years old. This is kind of a youth movement, I think, when you look at all these guys, Morris being 32, Poyer being 32, Trey White 29, Siran Neal 29. Feel like they want to get younger here. Any thoughts on Siran Neal?
I think you put it nicely that, yeah, he was an more unsung hero on some of these teams, right? He was quality special teams player, quality, reliable every year. That's why they kept him around. And then depth that was, when needed, called upon, right? But again, a guy who I think this season we saw miss a step a little bit, right? Like he slowed down a little bit. And that's where you're like, okay, now it's time to get younger, right? We got to move on. The next guy up, will be coming in. And they're, again, big shoes to fill, big expectations to fill. But yeah, it was time to move on from Siran Neal as well. Thankful for him.
Yeah, if you're looking around, I mean, it's a special teams role, which you can find, right? Not every guy can play on special teams, but I mean, the later round draft picks, you'll find a guy most likely, right, that can kind of fill that role. So I think you look at the numbers, and I think it's another easy decision here. especially because he's getting older. But just wanted to point out Siri Neal because he's been good for this team, and he's getting kind of overlooked because the other guys are so so big and so popular.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, speaking of popularity, Von Miller restructured contract, saves $8.6 million. This is really interesting, right? Because we saw the bad year last year for Von Miller. I mean, his expectation is to play better than he did last year, right? And I feel like he was just starting to get the hang of things, and the season ends, right? He was kind of getting better every game. But for him to come out and accept this, a restructured contract, it does have a lot of incentives where he could kind of earn that $20 million he was scheduled to get paid if he hits these, these milestones.
I have a lot of thoughts on this one
because he's also another older guy, right?
Uh-huh.
Do you think this is more about Von being a good teammate, wanting to help them go get people, or is this acknowledgement that, hey, I'm over the hill and I don't think I'm ever going to get back to what I was?
Let's be fully honest and transparent. I teased this one on Twitter a little bit about, look, I've got thoughts on this, and I posted some of it, but not all of it, because I knew we would have this platform to discuss in more detail and kind of interact with people, because a lot of what I saw was praising Von Miller. Wow, he took a pay cut. This is absolutely amazing. Nobody does this for a team. I can't believe he saved us this much money. And I should start by saying Von Miller, before he became a Buffalo Bill, was my favorite non-Buffalo Bill player in the NFL. If you said one player could become a Buffalo Bill, Von Miller would be probably number one on that list for me at that time, because I lived in Denver. We lived in Denver. I followed his career. I've always praised him at his play on the field. I've loved him as a player, his personality, his leadership. He's had a few, incidents that have happened over the year, but in Denver, in that community, Von Miller was a superhero. And I'm talking about outside of the world of football, right? There's football fans and we love Von Miller. Yeah, right. He's awesome. He's our MVP, whatever. But the community as a whole, people who don't really watch football, you say the name in Denver, you say the name Von Miller, and they know who he is. Yeah, Von Miller, he's awesome. He's our hero. He's, the Broncos. Yeah. And it was just an unbelievable thing to live in real time for me, right? Like when he was drafted, I was there and throughout his career in Denver. So that was awesome to see. And he's always been one of my favorite players. However, getting to where he is now, right? He's also a very smart and savvy guy, right? You're talking about a guy who says legitimately, I want to be a GM in this league. And he's not joking about it, right? He believes he can do it. He is a businessman. He is very smart and savvy about what he can do and, what he does with his money, things he invests in, all of that. He's very, very good. So where am I going with this? Why am I talking about all this off-field stuff? Well, because now we get to the reality of the situation. Von Miller did not knock on Brandon Beane's door and say, it's me. I'm willing to give up this much money for the team. Let's do this. Brandon Beane did not knock on Von Miller's door and say, Von, we need you to step up. You're the guy. Take this pay cut and we could make the next step. No, the reality of the situation is this is a business, right? So Brandon Beane came in and said to Von Miller, let's talk reality here. We can't get out of your contract. It sucks, right? We're at $20 million. You had the worst year of your career. You're coming off a major injury. If we cut you, you're going nowhere. You're not getting signed by another team. You're not getting another chance with a contender. Maybe somebody will give you $2 million to sit on their bench, but I highly doubt even that would happen. Why? Because he's also got a small off the field problem right now, right? And Von Miller and Brandon Beane are both aware of that. The media around Von Miller is not positive right now. His play on the field, not great. His incident off the field, not great. No team is going to be willing to take that PR move in my mind. Even if they were, he's still in a situation where two things matter to him. One, he said from day one when he came to the Buffalo Bills, I want to be the first guy to win a Super Bowl with 3 different teams. And he meant it. The other was, this big contract. Okay, that's part of this. That's who I am. He knows what the money value is. So if you cut him, what do you get? It screws the cap. Yes, right. But what does he get? Nothing. So Brandon Beane said, we have leverage here. You have an off the field incident that's going to hurt. Your contract number is way too big. You're not living up to it. where can we meet in the middle here? And that opportunity was Von Miller saying, I know I can get back to myself. Now, again, I know Von Miller from his time in the NFL, not personally, but the guy believes in himself. He believes every word he says. He speaks it into existence, right? He talks positive all the time. He knows how good he is and that he can return, right? So what do they do with the contract? They say, okay, it was 17. We'll make it 20 if you make these incentives. We don't know what those incentives are yet, but they're probably, a lot of them are unlikely to be earned. But maybe it's like, if you get 15 sacks, there's an extra 2 million or something, right?
Mhm.
If you get 20, say, oh, we'll give you 5 million, right? So that's, unlikely to be earned in a sense. But Von Miller is saying, that's my goal. I will be there next year. I am going to do that next year. So not only am I agreeing with you that the situation is such that I need to listen to you and give up some stuff in order to still be on a team and still show I can do it and still make some money too. But, you need to give us something in order, for me to say, I want to come back. I want that incentive. I can still make even more than you were initially offering me if I prove to you that I can still get it done. So it gives them both motivation. So this isn't to speak ill of Von Miller at all. It's to say that don't go around praising Von Miller. Everywhere I saw that on Twitter, I rolled my eyes. Like he somehow had an option. Oh, I'm just going to give up $12 million. Like, no, he didn't do that. This was a result of the situation he finds himself in, and that's the business of football.
I thought that Brandon Beane offered him a job after football to be the
Yeah.
assistant GM, and I thought that's what this deal was.
Yeah, yeah, right. Maybe
No.
he's like, you can be one of my guys, and it's not. I'm telling you, he's very good. He's very smart. Yeah, I think he would be a good, assistant GM, or at least in the offices where he could be part of that. But maybe this was his first reality check of, look, this whole team is changing in an instant, and that's what the job is.
Yeah, and you bring up some good points in that conversation, but at the end of the day, this just feels fair for both sides.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Now he still had to agree to it, so yes,
Yeah,
great.
right. But it does feel fair. Like, okay, you're coming off an injury. It's you definitely didn't live up to the contract that we were paying you, but we're going to give you that opportunity. It's still there. You didn't completely take it away, right? And I think that was a very fair move.
Yes. And on that point, the league frowns upon that, right? The NFL, the Players Association, isn't going to let players just walk away from money, right? Like, here you go, have some money back. No, the way it was accepted is because there are incentives that could actually make it more. Right. So that makes it,
and I think Von being with LA, right? The defense on that team was phenomenal. Aaron Donald, they had Leonard Floyd. In Denver, right? Kind of seen what it takes to be a Super Bowl defense. The defense won the Super Bowl for the Denver Broncos, and I think it was 2015 with Peyton. But it takes being selfless, right? Giving up some of that money so you can bring in other guys, right? If Von's goal is to truly win a Super Bowl with 3 teams, and he can see how close they are, right? You're a field goal away. You beat Kansas City, you're likely, if all things go well, the Super Bowl team. That's how close they are too. So it's like, I think him, acknowledging that I'm not living up to the 20 million a year. So the pressure is going to be on him going into the season, right? The first few games, everyone's going to be watching, but taking this cut, now you can kind of work into it again, right? The pressure's off a little bit, but also you're bringing in other pieces so you can be a better team and get back and accomplish your goal, right? Get back, make a run at the Super Bowl. You can maybe bring back Leonard Floyd with some of these savings, right? That's not out of the question now. Still think he gets paid, and I don't think the Bills are going to want to pay him as much as he's going to get. But that option's on the table, right? And I think Von saw that.
Yes. All right. Von is still, I still think fondly. When I left Denver and left my position there as a postdoc, my lab actually purchased, my gift was a Von Miller Denver Broncos jersey. At the time, he was still with the Broncos. So that was, my going away present, because they knew that I was a huge football fan and I was a Von Miller fan, and it was something to remember Denver by, even though they also knew that I'm a hardcore Bills fan. I still have that jersey and will for a long time, because it is meaningful to me of my time in Denver. So still will always have a positive place in my heart. I don't like the hate he's gotten. He certainly didn't play on the field, but he's got to step up. He didn't earn that money. That criticism is fair, but he came here to get the job done, and I know that's still what he wants to do, and I hope he does.
And that's a credit to his character, right? In my eyes. You said your goal is to win a Super Bowl. A lot of guys just say that, right?
Yeah,
I
no,
think Von
yeah,
truly means that, and I think
he
this
walks it.
move shows that a little bit. All right. We'll talk about that a lot more
I'm
this
sure, yeah,
offseason. Yeah,
every step of the way until
preseason, you know,
all the way into the season,
mini
that's gonna
camp,
be
right. All right, let's move on to Taylor Rapp and Mitchell Trubisky getting re-signed, Ryan Bates being traded, which I thought was surprising. Kind of have to unpack that one a little bit. And then David Edwards, we mentioned earlier, looks like he's going to compete for the starting left guard. But starting with Taylor Rapp, I mean, kind of the backup throughout the year, would fill in here and there. I thought he played pretty well overall for when he was playing, when he was starting at free safety. But again, you also notice that this is not Micah Hyde, right? There were some mistakes, and you notice that stuff too. But we already talked about a little bit. Is he the starter at free safety, or do you think he's competing?
Well, I mean, we haven't gotten the contract details, so always pump the brakes. Even though it looks like he got a big average annual, we don't know what that means. Maybe in the first year it's only $3 million, and then he's got an out where he could just get straight cut, and the money doesn't matter, right? So the contract number is what the agents and him want it to be reflected as. It's not the real number, so we need the details. However, I do agree that there was a bit of shock when I saw that number. I was like, huh? Yeah, not so much shock where they wanted to bring him back, right? I think we all knew that when they signed him to a 1-year deal last year, this was his audition tape to be the starter in the next time, right? So this year. So I think, obviously he did enough to show McDermott and Bean that he was worthy of being that guy and that they want him to stay around, if nothing else. Now, in my mind, I'm not Sean McDermott level evaluating of safeties by any means, but Rapp, in the opportunities he was given, the big opportunities, he disappointed me. He had a lot of misplays, a lot of penalties, a lot of, personal fouls. So he played reckless. It was just things that I didn't like about his play on the field as a Buffalo Bill. You can talk about the fact that he was on the championship team with the Rams and he played well there and he proved he's a starter and all that. Great. But as a Buffalo Bill in this system, at least playing as the number 3 guy, right? The number 3 safety, and in spots when he was playing more of a role, I was not thrilled with it. To me, I would not have re-signed Rapp. I would have preferred, okay, this was your audition, we'll bring in somebody else. Or, yeah, we'll keep you, but at a low number. So with this number that they gave him, your initial question was
$14.5 million over 3 years, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So about $5 million, right? So that to me says we want you to be the starter, right? Just the raw number. Again, we don't have the details, but to me that says we want you to be the starter, but we're saving a little bit of money to bring in some competition just in case. So I think that will be the case. Again, we've talked about it. I said it already today. I expect us to sign, the Bills to sign multiple safeties, right? They're going to bring in multiple of these free agent guys, even if it is somebody who's older or, cast away or injury prone, whatever. Right. They're going to give them that minimum salary, say, hey, you're competing for this starting role. If you can prove to us you've got it, right?
Well, also, they value continuity.
Yes.
Right. And they're kind of looking at it now going, we got no one in the safety room. Right? Like, so maybe Taylor Rapp's kind of the mentor role as well to help teach the defense, to kind of take that role.
Yeah. I mean, Hamlin is still there, but you don't look at him as a starter. He's been playing special teams and, getting snaps where he could. Even in the injured year, he was starting because he was necessary, right? Poyer and Hyde were both injured that year and he had to play. So we've seen what he can do. And I'm not saying that he's out of the question. Hamlin as competition to be one of the starters, he should get every legit chance. But, from what we've seen from him so far, I haven't seen that he's suddenly going to take a leap and become that, that level of a player versus bringing in a veteran that you can sign.
But I mean, he did play well in the playoff game in Miami or the last game of the year, right? Ended the way you want it to, interception, right? I mean, I think things got a little better as this season went on there, but again, this wasn't playing continuously, so it was kind of hard to do an evaluation, right? He didn't really get a lot of snaps, so I'd be interested to see him kind of as the starter. Like, how's this going to look? in
Gotta
year
give him a
2 in the
chance.
defense. So something to keep an eye on for sure.
But
But
yeah,
we'll get through the draft and we'll talk about, okay, did they take a safety? Does that person compete with Taylor Rapp? And that's going to be another off-season storyline that will last all the way up to this week 1, right? But how about Mitch Trubisky? How are you feeling about Mitch Trubisky coming back? I think we talked about this like
yeah,
2
right.
weeks ago, and you instantly said, I don't want Mitch Trubisky back.
I
Yeah,
mean,
here we
I
are.
no, I mean, I don't care, right? I
Yeah,
honestly don't care. If anything, I wish
yeah,
we signed him for less, right? You
right.
gave him what, 5 point
Well, I
something
think at the
million?
time you're looking at cap stuff and going, Mitch Trubisky's going to ask for a little bit more money than like the
Yeah,
veteran minimum
yeah,
for quarterbacks.
and he
You're like,
only took a little bit more than that, really. But I think what did they say? The contract number was like 2.7
right,
guaranteed
right. It
for
was a
this
huge
year.
cut, right.
So he's
He's kind of
definitely
out of options, it seems like, and the
yeah, but
Bills
he's
are kind of
getting
the only
paid.
one.
Exactly,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he
yeah.
has a good relationship. He knows the system. It makes sense. Like nobody's shocked. No Bills fan is like, "Oh my God, why would they do that?" No, he knows the system. He signed cheap. They liked him when he was here. He played that role well. The fact of the matter is, always with backup quarterbacks, you want them or expect them to go 500 if your starter is out for an extended time. And I think Trubisky is capable of doing that, right? Is he going to do that? I don't know, but he's capable. Is he better than Allen was last year, Kyle Allen? Probably, right? So
Probably.
it's a little bit of an upgrade, and they obviously liked what they saw out of him. He definitely looked better as a Bill than Kyle Allen did, right? I could say that much. So bringing him
He's a
back,
bigger
it's not
guy,
a
right? He looks
surprise.
better next to Josh Allen, right?
It's
Like,
there you go, same
yeah.
body type.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's not it's not surprising, but it's not moving the needle or exciting me in any way. It was a necessary move, basically, right? We needed a backup quarterback. He was on the market. It made sense. Boom, bring
Mhm.
you in. Now we don't have to think
Yeah.
about that anymore.
And like you said earlier, I don't care either way. The money seems right. You know, we don't expect to ever see him play unless it's the preseason. Ryan Bates traded to the Bears for a 5th-round pick.
Hmm.
I think they need a center. So, I mean, will he get a shot to start? Maybe that's what this trade's about. But you look around, okay, you're going to cut Mitch Morse. Ryan Bates, we know, played center, right? We know he's a good depth player. We've seen him fill in multiple roles and play well. I don't think there was a lot of cap savings there if they did cut him outright, but maybe they looked at it and went, look, we don't really necessarily have a role for you, but
Mhm.
this team wants you. Let's just take the pick. Or, hey, there's a guy in the draft we want. We want that ammunition to maybe move up a few spots and get him, right? Because I think they have, 10 or 11 draft picks
Yes.
now.
Yeah.
Um,
10 and a
so,
half. They'll have
good.
11 with the compensatory pick. So
Right.
that's why you keep hearing two
Right.
numbers from
But if
everybody,
that's
right?
the case, then you're looking around your roster going, okay, how can we get a 4th, 5th, 6th-round pick? And Ryan Bates is that guy. He has starting experience, plays multiple roles. Somebody's willing to grab him up. So I don't think
Yeah.
we'll ever really know, but
I
maybe we'll
think
find out in the
this
draft.
definitely feels like just doing right by the player, right? Ryan Bates probably said, "Hey, I want more opportunity. I want to be a starter." And, with the information coming out that it seems like Connor McGovern is going to be the center, maybe they did have that conversation with him and say, "Hey, we're moving on from Morse, but we think this is the direction we want to go." And, Bates was like, "Hey, I know that you have me in this role that you want on this team, but I want more opportunity than you're willing to give me. So let me move on." And the Bills were probably willing to do so, because I don't think you don't give up Ryan Bates, right? You don't. He
Mhm.
is a guy who can play any position on the line. He was your next up, at center guard. So versatile. Every team wants a guy like that. It's just a matter of it was the player probably wanting more than we were
Yeah.
willing to give. And, it's a cap move where you're like, okay, we're going to have to replace this player likely for similar amount of cap money as we just gave up. But yeah, doing right by the player. So I'm happy for Ryan Bates. I hope he succeeds. I have no ill will toward him. And it's just interesting how that situation worked out, because they were the team to originally tender him a contract that the Bills matched, and now they're getting him back anyway. So they
Right.
really like Ryan Bates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good for them.
Yeah. He must be a good guy. All right, let's get on to the next one here. Where does strong safety, cornerback, left guard, or center, right, now rank a bit among team needs? So now we have receiver, which I think most people think is the biggest need. I've argued that defensive tackle is the biggest need. Still no solutions there in all this shakeup. Edge, we still have question marks, right? But now strong safety is in that conversation, and maybe free safety depth, not a huge need. But again, left guard or center becomes a need. I wouldn't say it's a huge need, but what's your ranking now after the shakeup?
Well, the first two to me, even if we don't draft a safety, if we don't draft a cornerback, no sweat off my back. I am fine with that. Will we likely in the later rounds if we still have 11 picks? Probably, just for pure depth's sake.
Yeah, I
right?
think you
might
take a
as well.
corner every year, right?
Exactly,
Yeah,
right? You
yeah.
might as well take a shot. But I don't think those are valued positions for this team at this time. Now we need to fill some of those roles. We don't have a cornerback 4, or do we? Right? Like there's some guys who could fill that role. And the safety is one where, again, we've talked about it. I think they're going to rely more on free agency and then maybe bring somebody in for depth. The big conversation for me now becomes that guard center position. And I would call it exactly that. That's who they're looking for. They're not looking for a left guard or a center. They're looking for a guy who can be versatile and play guard and center, which is a niche in this draft, right? We know this draft has been talked about as one of the deepest offensive line drafts in a very long time, and teams are salivating at some of the opportunities to bring guys in who are probably going to be day one starters. And I think that does suddenly peek into my mind as to trying to think about what are McDermott and Bean thinking, because we talked about it to start the show. Shaking up that offensive line on Josh Allen just doesn't make sense to me. So they have a plan in place, and maybe that plan is we've evaluated a lot of these guard centers in this draft, and we know 3 of them, and we want one of them at least of these guys in the second or third round. I don't think they're going to get one in the first round, but maybe early on, if they suddenly draft a guard center guy, it's not going to come as a shock, because we did the same thing last year when we drafted a guard in the second round and the guy started literally every snap, right? So now they're probably thinking, right, we found
this
the key.
Is how you do it.
We found the key. Osiris Torrance worked.
Yeah.
Let's find that same guy that is a huge talent that, again, Osiris Torrance was one that was mostly looked at and drafted in the first round, mock drafted in the first round, right? And then it came to the actual draft. He falls to the second round, and they're like, hey, he's in our lap. We'll take him. And this year, I think they're going to have the same type of evaluation, because there's so many guys that are good on the offensive line in this draft. In the second round, you're still going to be able to get that kind of talent. And that, to me, puts a light bulb up that says this might be what they're thinking, and they're going to suddenly draft one of those guys in the second or third round and bring them in to compete, not just to be depth, to compete as the starter.
Right.
And that's going to be an interesting thing to see play out.
And I put a left guard and center up here, but I mean, if we're looking ahead and look, when they're looking at the cap, they plan 2-3 years out, right? Sometimes even longer. But I mean, you're looking at Deion Dawkins next year, this last year in his contract. Do you re-sign him? He's kind of getting to be an older player. Maybe you get a guy who can play left guard and then transition to left tackle, right? It's kind of what Deion Dawkins did, right? He was kind of drafted as a guard. He could play guard, but he's just really good at left tackle. And he kind of held that position down for years. So they could be looking at that as well and making this move based on, hey, we need to find somebody so we can maybe replace Deion in the future. Because, I mean, even if he gets another deal, it'll be just a couple years probably, right? And then you'll have to move off him anyway.
Yeah, he's getting older. But, yeah, yes. I mean, Dawkins is one of those extension candidates right now. And I do think they will give him, I mean, they should extend him for sure. But like you're saying, it's not going to be a 6-year deal. It's going to be a 3-year deal, right? Like something a little more palpable there, probably with some outs on the back end, because, left tackles are premium positions and you need to think about that. And same with right tackle, right? Spencer Brown going to be a free agent next year. Could he be a extension candidate now? Because right now he's not demanding top level tackle money. If you wait, you're going to have to pay him if he plays that well, this year. But if you sign him now, you could get that deal. Think of the, Ed Oliver deal right now. That looks like an absolute steal. That could end up being the same thing with Spencer Brown, but you need to find the money in order to invest it there and, kick the can down the road if that's what you're doing. But part of making them available, if that is your plan, is to fill that center guard position with younger talent like Osiris Torrance already is locked in, right? And whoever we bring in next could be that same kind of move.
Yeah, and how about wide receiver? So I know we've talked about this extensively. I think the whole fan base is excited about receiver. And we've really been talking about, let's just replace Gabe Davis, a guy with straight line speed, who can stretch the field, right? We don't really need the route runner. We just need that straight line speed guy. But I think with Hardy out now, does that change your thinking at all? I mean, I know we still have Shakir for that role. But again, do you now want somebody who can maybe play in the slot at times and be more versatile?
Well, I've been preaching 2 wide receivers in the draft all along, right? I do think that you wanna match skill sets. So, no matter what it is, you get the opposite. So, say they end up drafting in round 1 the guy who is a better route runner and not the speedster down the field, then I think later in round 4 or 3 or whatever it ends up being, you draft a speedster who is that field stretcher to complement that. So, it's not filling Gabe Davis' role strictly as the next Gabe Davis, but in 2 different ways, right? You have a guy who has that straight line speed who can be that, and a guy who is a crisp route runner and fits that need. Because I've seen that debate around as well. Well, schematically, such and such player fits the Bills better because he is more of a dink and donk route runner, crisp guy rather than a get down the field and get open guy. But we still need both of those things, right? Right now on this roster, I don't think we have get down, get open type of receiver, right? And I don't think we have an X receiver, obviously, who can be, a crisp route runner in place of Gabe Davis. You're right that I agree. Khalil Shakir is that guy now, right? He is a crisp route runner. He does have great hands. He should get lots of opportunities, but that doesn't mean you don't stack that position still. So I would still love to get 2 wide receivers, and still look at free agency as well and see how you can complement that.
Yes, I think the conversation continues, right? It's there's more on the table now. I think strong safety's on the table, but it's still receiver, big need, defensive tackle, big need.
Bills met
And
with more
I'd say
receivers
strong
than
safety,
any
big
team.
need.
Isn't that crazy? Bills met with more receivers than
Yeah.
any team. I thought that was,
Well,
telling
and
right there.
yeah, and I think Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have always been transparent. Hey, we want to
Yeah.
be more explosive, right? They
Uh-huh.
say kind of what they're thinking every year, and it usually turns out to be true or somewhat true. And who knows what they're trying to do, and the plan falls apart, right? We'll never know that. But this year, I think it's been obvious. They want to get explosive. They're meeting with the receivers. The draft is absolutely loaded with receivers. So there's so many options out there for them. It's just now what type of receiver do you want, or which would you prefer? That's kind of where they're at. I mean, we've talked about it extensively. A.D. Mitchell, pretty high on my list. Brian Thomas Jr., very high on my list, but I think he's
going to be gone.
He looks too good that he's going to be gone in the top 15 or top 20.
We can trade up. I'm telling you, it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up dropping a little bit. They could do that.
But we have free agency next week, and then we're going all in on the draft. So make sure you tune in with us. We're at 7:30 on Thursdays on the Built in Buffalo Network. We will beat this draft up and give everybody all the insights we can.
Yes. It's been fun to start prepping for the draft for sure. But with free agency looming, likely that'll be our topics of conversation next week, because it's going to be happening all week on the live, right? There's going to be breaking news pretty much every day. One last question I was going to ask that we didn't cover: a lot of cuts around the NFL, obviously, as they're cleaning up for the new league year next year. Anybody get cut that you're like, ooh, I kind of had my eye on that guy? Justin Simmons, or like somebody.
Well, Simmons is probably priced out. I do like
exactly.
him.
I don't think there was just a name of somebody.
Well, there's 2 guys, because
Seattle
before this week I was thinking who's the bargain bin guys, right? And I thought what was interesting is Michael Thomas from the Saints, who I know has had crazy amount of injury
problems.
But so has Hardy, and that turned out he played most of the season. I mean, I would take a look there. I don't think he would really. He's had too many injuries, in my opinion. But man, he was a good player in his prime.
Yeah.
Guy like Jamal Adams obviously catches your eye. But again, same problem. Can't stay healthy. But again, will he be a bargain bin type player? I'll have to go back and look again, because now we have a little bit of cap room to play with. It kind of changes your perspective a little bit, right?
Right. They're going to have money to invest to play with a little bit.
And there's also a ton of safeties that got cut this week.
Yes, that's what I mean. So it's opening things up in that free agent market.
So there's lots of options out there.
And it's not a position that gets paid a lot, right? We're not talking about cornerback or left tackle or something like that. Well, safeties have been devalued across the league.
But I really wasn't even paying attention to safety, really, because, kind of knew we were going to have Rapp, and then the Poyer cut. You're like, I wasn't expecting that. I didn't even look at strong safety at all. right? So I really was
Yeah.
looking at free safety, if anything, which was very slim in free agency until recently, until this week.
Well,
So
at least for me, whenever I see these headlines, it's always my first thought is Bills first, right? Like, oh, can this player contribute to the Bills? No. Okay, moving on, right? Like maybe they'll be a fit for so and so team. I do kind of think that in my head, but the first step is, could this be somebody to bring to the Bills? And certainly there are names being cut that would contribute on this team and would fill positions of need. They just brought in a defensive tackle for an interview, right? So that
yeah,
no surprise there either.
Jeff
You
from
know,
Jacksonville.
we have
Yeah,
nobody on the roster, and everybody's like, well, maybe that means they're not re-signing Daquan Jones. No, we literally need a lot of tackles, right?
you
We
need
have
like
none.
5
So if we
defensive
sign
tackles.
him, you
Yeah,
could stick him on the bench, and you still need
yeah,
3 other guys. So yeah, it's going to be a heck of a move.
yeah.
Lots
It'd
of
be a lot
moves
of
there.
fun. But
So.
also wanted to ask you, there's a lot of NFL news. I think Jalen Johnson got re-signed. Dotson, I think
Yeah,
he's a
big one.
tackle out
Yeah.
of the Rams, got a big contract.
Mm-hmm.
How about Russell Wilson? We haven't really had a chance to talk about this.
Hmm.
I just, the Sean Payton hiring really, to me, speaks to new ownership, right? Inexperienced
Yeah.
ownership. You have a quarterback like Russell Wilson who is an improviser. He's not going to play in a system. I think everyone knows that, right? But then you bring in a very much system quarterback or system head coach in Sean Payton, right? So it's almost like you created your own problem there, right? But just wanted to hear your thoughts on where you think Russell Wilson lands.
Um, I think there's teams that need to consider him, right, because of who he is. And I think at this point, he's not going to command a lot of money, right? So if you're a quarterback needy team, your eyes should be open, right? And I don't look at a team like the Falcons, who are trying to really take that next step and are already built to win, but a team like the Steelers, who they just kind of maintain. I think it could be a good fit. And, I know there's been a lot of talk of New England, right? That to me, it makes sense, right? Bring him in for a few million, have him compete or whatever. And if he becomes the starter and ends up winning you games, you look like a genius. And if he doesn't and you end up cutting him, it's no sweat off your back. So I think there are teams that need to respect the fact that Russell Wilson has been a successful quarterback in the NFL and is a Super Bowl winner and, still makes good plays and is more valuable than what they currently have. That's why I brought up those teams, the Steelers, the Patriots. I mean,
Yeah.
Russell Wilson is 2 steps above what you have in my mind right now, even though he's at the tail end of his career and has not played well over the last 2 seasons. He's still, I was in person for the Bills game this year, and let me tell you, Russ was cooking that game because we let him. But I don't think he's going to ever be an elite level NFL quarterback again, but the guy is suitable and can play and can still get it done.
Yeah, he had a pretty good year overall. Yeah, and I agree with you on the Patriots. It's like he almost feels like a Patriot guy.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, trying to play the hero all the time and does everything right and is working out in the airplane on the way home. It's like that feels very much Patriot way.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't even know if Patriot way is a thing anymore with the changes they've had.
Yeah, well, they didn't really changed. Rod Mayo is it's Patriot way.
It'll be interesting. I mean, Kirk Cousins is the first quarterback to fall. That's going to really set the tone. Like Minnesota, I think, is a really, they're really going to be looking for a quarterback if Kirk Cousins goes somewhere else. They're going to be looking to trade up in the draft. Could Russell Wilson be a guy that ends up there, right? That's, again, doesn't feel right because it's more of the system type structure there, but they're a team that you look at and they're like, they may not have any options and they're going to be big time shoppers, right?
Yeah, I think even if they do trade up, they don't get Cousins, they trade up and get a guy, it's not going to be the spot for Russ. So I think it'll be one of those other free agents, right? Sam Darnold or something like that,
right.
Who you bring in to help and mentor and maybe play while the young rookie learns, right? So
maybe Atlanta. How do you feel about Atlanta?
No, I don't think that's a good match for Russ at all. I think they're going all in. They're going to be the ones who end up, if Minnesota doesn't get Kirk Cousins, Atlanta will. And if Atlanta doesn't get Kirk Cousins, they're going to end up with, Justin Fields or something like that. I said that on our show way back when, right? That I thought Fields was a great match for that team in Atlanta because they're still young, they're still growing.
You're having memories of Mike Vick.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
It feels right because Mike Vick played there, right?
It's right. It's
not quite
this young team who's still learning. They all still have growth. They could all take a step at the same time. And then you're talking elite level offense. If all of those guys there reach their maximum potential, if they get a Justin Fields, they're going to be one of the best teams in the NFL without even trying.
Yeah. And I like the Commanders too, but again, just that's
a hard sell.
They're not. They're not going to be signing a free agent quarterback.
Yeah.
You have the number 2 pick. But man, their team would be better if they took Marvin Harrison, signed Russell Wilson. Your team's still better.
True.
Anyway, tune in with us every Thursday, 7:30 on the Built in Buffalo Network. Appreciate everybody's time. It's been a crazy week as a Bills fan. I mean, I saw as a Jeremy White from WGR on Twitter said, "Hey, Bean, can you spread these out a little bit for us?" Right?
Yeah.
Kind of came
throwing it all at the board. But he's been working for weeks on this. I mean, these are heartfelt conversations that he had with players, and it's been kept under wraps. So again, kudos to Bean for being able to do that, get the job done, and One Bills Drive in general for saying, look, this doesn't leave the house, because these are big time conversations that are meaningful and matter. And it all came out at once because that's when they wanted it to come out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it seems very calculated to all come out like this, and it's the right thing to do. And explain to the families, right, the whole thing, and then let everyone know, put it out in the media. But really excited for the future, right? You got to get this draft right. You really can't afford to miss in this one.
Yeah.
Right. And then the free agents, that's going to be a lot of fun too, just to see who
free agency next week.
Who's going to be competing.
Wild. It's going to be wild. Yeah. It'll be a fun conversation next week to see where it's going to completely transform in 1 week. Everybody's roster, the division is going to be a lot to talk about next week. So we look forward to continuing a conversation then. And as always, thanks for kicking it with us.